ahead. You want to stand?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'll stand for just the beginning, yeah. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So excited for you to join us on today's panel on decoding talent. We have an amazing set of panelists that are here to share their expertise. You can sit anywhere. So we have with us today Heidi Stopper, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer for Siemens. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Linda Kozlovski is the VP of Operations Worldwide for Evernote. And Rosa Riera, who's the head of employer branding and diversity at Siemens. And they are going to talk to us today and share their perspectives about how technology and data is changing the way that they are recruiting and in changing the way that they are managing people. So before we get started with the conversation, I would like to give you a very, very brief overview about some of the research that we've been doing with my co-authors over the last 2 years about big data and how it's changing the way people are working. So it's going to be very, very quick, so I would like to just share with you some of the findings. So ultimately, we know, as everyone here in the room is aware of, that the world is changing, and it's changing very, very fast. And I want to talk about 2 specific trends that are going to impact every single person in this room right now. The first trend is that we're moving towards an area, or an era rather, of data abundance. And why this is significant is because for the last 75 years, for the entire creation of management theory, the way that we decide how to run businesses, we've been operating in a world where data was very, very expensive and it was hard to find. And now the opposite is true. Data is very cheap and there's a lot of it. One of the reasons why there's so much data is because everyone in this room has played a part in creating it. So when you think of the amount of information that we create, I want you to look at some of these numbers. 300 million Facebook photos are shared every day, 175 million tweets, 35,000 hours of YouTube video. This is just one simple way of all of this information that we are creating. The second really big trend is that there's a talent shortage that is happening. And while this may sound counterintuitive, because I know we're seeing in the newspapers that there's rising unemployment, the reality is that for certain segments of the population, people that have the right skill sets, whether they're technical skill sets or strategic skill sets or creative skill sets, those people are very much in high demand, and companies are having a hard time filling those jobs. According to a global executive survey, 1 out of 3 employers reported having difficulty in finding the right person to do the right job that they were looking for. And we'll have some insight from our lovely panelists today about why this is happening. We saw survey results from executives all the way, even in Germany, China, India, the United States, that actually said this problem was getting worse. And there's a number of different reasons for that. Mobility is increasing. People can move around to find jobs. There's increasing competitiveness. Technology is making it easier for people to create their own businesses. In essence, the labor market as a whole is changing. So why should you care? A lot of people think that data is a technology issue, and the reality is that's not the case. It has now become a people issue. If you work with people or manage people, or if you are people, I can guarantee you that data is going to be something that you should pay attention to. In some of the executives that we reported, the #1 biggest concern was how technology was actually changing employee expectations. People now have the expectations for certain services, certain devices at work, certain flexibilities, and that's changing cultures, and it's changing the way that people are managing and recruiting. And finally, as a leader, if you are managing people, the way we're implementing these technological issues have a much broader impact. We have issues around ethics, ethical policies, privacy, transparency. This cannot be a discussion that is only led by technical experts. This has to be a conversation that involves managers and strategic thinkers and founders and leaders. So the decoded model is a set of 3 values that we researched. So we spent 2 years traveling all around the world, talking to very successful companies, big established companies like Whole Foods in the US, small startups, like a 3-person startup in Japan, a 4-person startup in Sao Paulo. And we looked at companies that were doing really well and who were using data creatively. And we said, OK, what were the things that they all have in common? And all of them have in common that they embody one of these values. So I'm going to go through them very quickly and give you a very quick example. The first is called technology as a coach. So the way businesses have traditionally been is that every process is the same for everyone. Standardization has been the response. You get trained the same way, you get onboarded the same way, you get recruited the same way, you get evaluated the same way. But the reality is that every single individual is different. We all learn in different ways, and we all have different speeds and different preferences in how we learn. Now, as consumers, we're used to this type of individualization. You know, Netflix tells us personalized recommendation, Amazon gives personalized suggestions. So why is it that as consumers, we can have a very customized experience, and as employees, we can't? I'll give you an example in the education sphere. This is a company called Newton. They're a startup in New York. They're an education startup that has an adaptive learning platform. And what it does is when students use the platform to take their lessons, whether it's math or English or science, what happens is the system learns. It learns what type of questions do they learn best. Is it multiple choice or fill in the blanks? What order should the subjects be in? How long should each lesson be? And it takes all of that information and it produces a customized interactive textbook so that each student in the class learns in a way that makes sense to them through the method that works best for them. So imagine if you took this and you applied it to performance reviews, certain protocols, etc. The second big value of the decoded model is called data as a sixth sense. And this says that with all the information that we have available, we now have access to certain insights and information that can help us make better decisions. Here's a quick example. This is, I know it's a bit hard to see, this is a technology by a company called Cataphora. And this network is a particular company. And what they have done is that they have mapped using a very sophisticated algorithm and have identified the people who create good ideas that are shared. That's the blue circle. Which are creators, and green are the people who share ideas across the company. So the CEO can take a look at this map, and they can identify that that person up there with a big circle, they might be very quiet, they might not speak up a lot in meetings, but they come up with ideas that create a lot of value for the company. And this other person who's in green, you know, they are very talented in sharing information with their colleagues. So this type of information can be very, very useful when you're trying to make decisions about hiring, about promotions, about cutbacks. And what I love about this particular system is that it takes away a lot of the biases, which is another thing that we're going to talk about very briefly. It takes a lot of the biases that we can sometimes have when dealing with colleagues. We can have somebody in a meeting who's very quiet, who doesn't speak up, who's a bit more introverted, but the data shows that they are actually, in a very quantitative way, contributing to the company, meaning they won't get left behind or ignored or passed over because somebody else speaks up a bit more or gets more face time with the boss. And the last bit is called engineered ecosystems. And engineered ecosystems talks about companies that use data very specifically to cultivate certain behaviors, to cultivate the types of behaviors to build better, happier cultures. I'll give you a very quick example. Google launched a project last year called Project Oxygen, where they did a huge survey and they looked at over 10,000 data points to see what their most successful and popular managers had in common. They generated, after months of research, a list of 8 character traits that all of their best performing managers shared. And then they took those 8 character traits and they created specific training programs for the rest of their employees to make sure that those traits were being cultivated and amplified. And based on that research and based on their training program, 1 year after the implementation of that program, and they have seen a huge increase in satisfaction and in positive improvements between managers and employees, and they have had a huge increase in satisfaction at work. So ultimately, these are just some very simple examples, and I'm sorry if I went really fast. It's very hard to condense a whole book in 7 minutes, but I tried my best. So these are some of the issues that companies are struggling with today. And now that we have this sort of 20,000-foot view, I'm very excited to turn to our panelists who have experience in their own particular industries and to see how they're tackling with it. So, Linda, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you and all of the panelists to just give a brief overview of your role and how technology and data is changing the way that your business is working.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here, and I'm happy to be on the panel today. Again, Linda Kozlovski, I'm VP of Worldwide Operations for Evernote. So my area of responsibility is really managing the operations and development of Evernote globally, including the fact that 75% of our user base is outside of the US. So we spend quite a bit of time on the international aspect of the business growth. Specifically, in case any of you are not familiar with what Evernote is an application and a service that you would download on multiple devices, on your phone, your computer, your tablet, etc., that lets you capture information, capture notes, images, emails, web clippings, anything that you need in order to better do your work on a day-to-day basis and achieve your goals. And it lets you find them and use them across all of your different devices. So we operate in 22 different languages, including handwriting recognition, to make everything searchable and retrievable no matter where you are. So data for us is actually quite important, both as a company internally, as well as a consumer-facing product. So I'll talk a little bit about how data and technology has worked both within Evernote as well as what it means for our business model on the outside. Primarily, what's interesting about Evernote is we believe that people should have the best tools that they want for their jobs. So there's a lot of discussions around bring your own device, BYOD. We believe that that's dead. We don't believe in bring your own device, because the only reason bring your own device ever existed was because people didn't like what the company was providing for them. It wasn't that they really wanted to pay for their own device. They just wanted the company to give them a really good device. So that's what we did. At Evernote, we're very proud of the fact that we provide our employees with the best technology that they want to use in order to be productive. So we let people choose whatever device they want to work on. They get a variety of high-quality devices, both desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile, so they can experience things the way that they want to experience and make their lives more efficient. And we've created that in such a way, in an environment, by using our own software, which encourages team collaboration. We're really, really pushing our employees to be as collaborative, open, and transparent as possible. The business version of Evernote lets you actually collaborate with your colleagues by, as you're working, it surfaces the knowledge that they have on similar topics. So as you're sitting and working in Evernote and you're writing a presentation or writing a proposal, you're going to see notes from your colleagues in their business account that they've actually done that are similar. So it makes you more efficient by sharing the knowledge of your colleagues, but it also makes your colleagues more efficient because everybody's creating material that is shared within the organization to make everybody more productive. So our office environment is completely open. Nobody has an office. Everything is same size desks. Everybody, CEO all the way down, sits in the same area. We can all see each other, we can all hear each other, and we can all openly collaborate just as we do within our software. So that's how it impacts us on the internal side. On the external side, we're a little bit different from most companies like us. A lot of people, their first question when they understand what Evernote does is they're like, okay, how do you monetize your data? The answer is we don't. Evernote is very strict about its privacy policies and about how we handle data. We want to develop software that is valuable to you precisely because everything you put into Evernote stays in Evernote and stays yours. We don't mine your data, we don't monetize it, we don't serve advertising based on it. Our entire business model is based on you pay for a valuable piece of software that you can use to make your life better. That's it. But that creates a unique challenge when it comes to the business model because everyone expects us to have all this big data that we're mining to try to create some sort of monetization model, and we don't do that. So we are an anti-big data company, basically. So what that means is the people who work within Evernote have to have a huge amount of respect for data, and they also have to be there simply to develop the best application you can possibly imagine to use to manage your own data personally and privately. So it's a very different mindset, and it's a very different type of employee. It's also a very different type of customer. And it causes a lot of restrictions around the type of people that we want to bring into the company, because we need to have people that have the same DNA as what we're trying to do.
That's great. And I just wanted to clarify one point, that the people who are using Evernote on even the business side, they get to choose what they want to share and what they don't want to share.
Correct.
OK, great. Heidi?
Yeah, why I am here on that panel to speak about decoding and how technology and data changed our lives. Maybe first reason is I'm a dinosaur. I know how life was without data and without internet and without even mobile phones, what is not imaginable for my son, for example. So life changed a lot since then. The second reason why I'm here is decoding. I think my career would have been very difficult to be decoded, as it was so in-linear. I had I would say, a typical one for today, because I jumped and I changed my ways different times. I worked in different industries in different countries. I had very often to skip my plan A and to find a plan B. And I'm sure that there will be different changes in the future as well. So decoding is an interesting point of view in terms of talent management, and this is the third reason why I'm here. Talent management is concerning all of us, because all the business we do is driven by humans. And I'm sure that the use of data is not fully harvested yet in industry. But I'm also a very strong believer that at the end, there is a mysterious part of human beings, what can't be decoded and what should be covered with data. This is the human factor, but is extremely important from my point of view. And I think it's our duty to ensure that we use data, but we do not forget about the human factor as well.
Rosa?
So I'm the head of employer branding and diversity for Siemens, as you said. And for those of you who don't know Siemens, we're a large German technology company. We're active in 190 countries. We have 360,000 employees. So the scale is quite massive. And also the breadth of our business is it's very diverse. So from a blood test to a gas turbine to solutions for factories, we're pretty much there. And if you think about the healthcare business, the amount of data that we generate there for through our systems, this is of course something where we have to be very careful about what data we generate, and there are privacy issues, and there are also there is a restriction from the patient to be that they don't want that data to be shared. However, we could all benefit from doing something that you described, learning from that data. And when it comes to the talent, there we see also a big shift. You're talking about transition. We're talking about how we are able to identify talent. Nowadays, most of us have a LinkedIn account, so it's easier to find talent and to attract and talk to talent. When it comes to identifying talent, we're not so bad. I think when it comes then to developing the talent in the organizations, that's where data can help us, for sure. And where the internal systems in a company that are getting better and better can help us help our talent grow.
Great. So I want to focus just for a minute on the actual labor market, because I know we've had conversations and all of you have such interesting perspectives and vision about it. So Linda, I'm going to go back to you. As a tech company, can you tell me how you see the labor market?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting for us, because given what Evernote does and given how we work with people to be more productive in their lives in general, we've seen a definite shift to what we call the knowledge worker economy. So most everyone now is working in a field where knowledge is their competitive differentiator. It may not be manufacturing, or it may not be, or the manufacturing is part of it, but the knowledge aspect is becoming more and more and more important. So as we're noticing this across both emerging economies and developed economies, we're seeing a lot of people shift to a need to be able to manage all of that information effectively in order to drive that competitive advantage. So for us, the play between technology from an infrastructure perspective, as more and more people get access to broadband, to mobile networks, to reasonably priced smartphones, at the same time you see this rise of the knowledge worker, you're coming up with a whole new generation of people that can succeed and go beyond anything they ever anticipated, regardless of where they are in the world, because there's so many more opportunities for them to connect, for them to harvest that knowledge, and for them to share it. So it's pretty exciting for us to watch as different countries shift in different ways, and the types of talents that are coming to the forefront through this kind of new knowledge-based economy.
And what are some things that Evernote is doing to really develop or to recruit some of those people?
Well, it's a few different things. I mean, we're working very hard, and we're actually sponsoring quite a few girls' science teams and research teams in high school level to try to encourage more women in technology and more women in those types of positions. So that's something both fun and exciting that we're doing. But we're also really working on how do we provide and work with partners to penetrate some of these markets and get more and more access to data management and knowledge management for people's own personal success stories in some of these emerging markets like Indonesia, India, Latin America, et cetera. And so using our software to help people find competitive advantage and help people not only when they're in school and actually studying in school, but then also first entering the workforce is a big part of where we're seeing our software being used.
Heidi, you mentioned to me that in addition to being the chief head of human resources at this media company, you also run your own business and you're an entrepreneur. And so I think you have a very interesting perspective on both sides. You mentioned something to me that I think would be very interesting for this room about how now is the time for people to be able to make certain demands about the type of work that they wanted. Could you just elaborate on that point a little?
So my experience, driven by my corporate experience, but as well by my own business, is that today the applicants are the companies. I see myself very often in situations sitting ahead of, I would say, 25-year-old, very self-confident applicants, lying in the chair like this, saying, "Now tell me what you can do for me." This will become more and more reality. And I think there's a huge shift in the market from an employer to an employee market, and especially this is valid for well-educated applicants running out there in the market. And we see already the tendency that there is not everybody willing anymore to join as an employee. There's a huge group outside in the market who wants to be a freelancer because the market is theirs. So this drives totally different habits for companies, but as well for me with my own business, because we have to approach people very different than we did in the past. And I think the most important thing is that talent relationship management will replace totally recruiting. And even today, our motto is hunting instead of fishing. So that means the recruiting ways of the past, they already died out. And we have to be very, very active in dealing with that. And in terms of females, I think this is the best moment to demand things, to ask for the working conditions you need to fulfill your demands to balance private and professional life. And I know perfectly about that because when my son was 6 years old, he did his A-levels recently, I had no chance for letting him in kindergarten on Friday afternoon. So I had to tell my employer, well, I need a teleworking place. And I was the first one. And they said, this is impossible. Leadership and teleworking, this does not go together. And I said, well, this is sad, then I have to find another employer. We did it. So I got in a probation period, a teleworking place, and I remember very well, I got calls every Friday, so Friday was the day I worked from home, and people always excused at the beginning of the call and said, well, Heidi, I'm so sorry to disturb you on your holiday. It was very strange. But finally, 3 years later, I was the HR director at that time. We won the prize of the state Baden-Württemberg for the most family-friendly company. 40% of all leaders could work with Telearbeit. And I think now is best time ever to demand whatever you need, and employers have to move.
What are some of the things that you're seeing people asking for? What are they pushing for?
What we can see that very cliché Generation Y type of things, that salary is not the only sexy thing anymore for applicants, but we see a lot of individual things, and I think this is a huge trend as well, that the dogma of standardization, of 100% standardization, will not work anymore in the future, because people do not want to be treated all the same. They want to be treated extremely individually, and that means we have requests from everything. We have 65-year-olds who want to keep on working full-time. We have 23-year-olds without families who only want to work 20 hours a week. So there is a huge range of demands which a company is confronted these days, and I think we have to find answers for that.
So, thank you. I think that's very, very interesting. So, Rosa, you were telling me that your company, while you do collect a lot of data, there's also a lot of restrictions, both for your company, but from what I understand, in Germany as well. And I was wondering, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest opportunities you see for data, and what are some of the challenges that could be blocking you from getting there?
Whenever we try to get data about our employees that goes into their performance, if we deviate from the process, that is something that needs to be clarified with the Workers' Council first, and so there are very strict regulations towards that. I think whenever information is freely shared, and at Siemens we have the Siemens social network. It's a social media platform internally. We have TechnoWeb, which is more project-based, and I'm not quite sure, I think it's about 2 years old, the Siemens social network, and we have 100,000 people already on the network, every day sharing and talking to each other. That data, unless it's in a closed group, is available to us. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we can definitely collect and look into. And I think that to your point, what people want today is they want meaning, and they want to work for a company that provides, that does something good for the world. That's often the topics in the discussions. And so in order to attract talent, and I can only echo what you say, that we kind of have to hunt more than fish, but the way of hunting that we prefer is to start a dialogue and to be more open, and social media offers us that opportunity to get in dialogue with the companies, with the applicants, or the applicants with the companies. So in terms of what kind of data we collect, everything that cannot be traced to an individual is absolutely okay to track. And I also head up diversity, so those kind of numbers are very relevant to us. And looking into that, analyzing them, seeing the needs, also give us the opportunities to create programs that cater to those needs. At some point, we realized that we didn't have enough talent identified in the emerging markets. Now, that's not because there is not talent in our emerging markets. That's because probably they didn't have the visibility that they needed, so we created a program, Top Talent for Growth. And that is because we looked at the data, we analyzed it, and then we took action.
Can you elaborate a little bit? You were telling me about some of the biases that everybody has and how that can impact some of the recruiting process, and the challenges you've had in developing or training people to look past certain things.
Yes. So in 2010, we started in the diversity group to really look into the concept of unconscious bias. And and how that creates a situation where we keep recruiting the same people, and we see that we don't reflect the societies in our company as much as we could, probably. And we started with a managing board, where we trained our managing board on unconscious bias. We developed training. We trained our diversity networks just to become aware. And now we are in the process of developing that training for all Siemens employees, where you can test your biases, and then also it gives you tools to mitigate that bias. What I would like to do in future is to really look into every single process, from the recruiting to the development and to the leadership development of the talents, where and at which parts we can improve or mitigate those potential biases, so that we attract more diverse talent and also develop more diverse talent.
And one of the examples that Rosa shared with me yesterday, which we don't really do in North America, was that in Germany, on your CV, you put your picture and your age, and if you're married, and
that's very normal.
It's very normal.
Applicants share this, yes.
And so I thought that was very interesting in terms of the biases that you mentioned, because people make. I said the same thing. I was like, whoa, that's so.
I have to clarify. That's not something we ask on our system. But we allow applicants the opportunity to upload their profiles, and very often we see that this is, in Germany, the normal profile looks like this: a picture, date of birth, married, children, hobbies.
Linda, what's your response to that, just as a reaction, I guess?
You know, it's funny, because it's the same in Asia as well. When I was working in Hong Kong, I saw a lot of that too, and it always throws me off still to this day, even after seeing it for 20 years, where you're just constantly imagining that this in the US is such a foreign part of the process. You would never be allowed to discuss any of that as part of a job interview. So it's fascinating to me. My gut reaction is always quite strong, but I know it's normal for many countries, but for the US it's completely different.
I did read an article the other day that one of the things that they put in Asia is also their height, and there was a whole movement of people that were below a certain height feeling discriminated against because employers were only hiring people that met this like minimum height requirement. And it was just like a very, very interesting look at the different ways that we recruit. So one of the amazing benefit of having such talented women here is the opportunity to benefit from their expertise. And I wanted to make sure that as a part of this panel, everyone in the audience could walk away with an actionable piece of advice, something that they have learned from their years of experience in the field. So Heidi, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to put you on the spot first. But what would be one thing that you would recommend for everybody in the audience to either start doing, or that they should be doing, or something to be, a piece of advice that they can walk away with about sort of the overview of this topic?
Yeah, I have a lot of gray hair, but wisdom is not so far. But I think my motto was always to check every morning whether I like to get up and whether I like what I do.
That you do that for personally?
It goes maybe a little bit toward the direction that you're going. Once I have the impression that I'm the person who knows most within the team, it's time to do something different, to move on, to let someone else maybe take the spot. I think you have to constantly evolve and also give others the opportunity to evolve.
That is actually great advice. Never be the smartest person in the room.
That's right.
I think that is such great advice.
Great.
I love it. Lindo, you go back to you.
I think I discovered early on, after my family kept asking me questions over and over again about why I chose to do different things, that I like to be uncomfortable. If I'm ever comfortable, I feel like I'm not learning anything. I feel like I'm bored. I feel like if I'm ever comfortable, that's a warning sign to me. I like being uncomfortable. That's why I picked up and moved to Asia. That's why I've worked for an interesting set of companies and made some very specific shifts in my career. Because I think that one of the things that, and I'll go out on a limb here and say that women are particularly adept at is being uncomfortable and trying to figure out how to handle a challenging situation, and that's what I thrive on. So I'm constantly throwing myself into different cultures, into different situations, into topics that are new to me, and then I know that I'm always kind of developing and growing. But once I'm comfortable, time to try something new.
So I love that. I love that. Oh, yes, please, a round of applause. I love that each bit of your advice all shared the same thing, which is to always check in and to see how you're doing and to check in how you're feeling. Whether it's funny that you measure discomfort, Heidi measures love, you check your assumptions, but at the end of the day, you're always pushing yourselves forward. For me, I think the one thing in studying and in writing about data for the past 2 years for this book has been that a lot of people's reaction is fear. There's a lot of concern about data, and I'm not going to say, you know, data is like the best thing ever, because for every good use, there's also some people that are using it very horribly. But what I am going to say is that when we are in a very new phase right now, and there's a lot of questions, and so being afraid isn't the answer. I think the answer is to really be educated, ask questions, ask your employer questions, ask your colleagues questions, and really identify what it means for privacy, for transparency, because it shouldn't be the data scientists and it shouldn't be the technology that is guiding the policies forward. It should be the people in this room who get to decide what they want to share and what they don't want to share. So I want to thank the panelists for their excellent advice and for sharing all of their insight with us, and thank all of you for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.